Detroit isn't the same city people imagine when they think about the Motor City glory days. I grew up here, and I've seen how entire blocks have gone quiet, factories boarded up, neighborhoods with more empty windows than lit ones at night. Work isn't easy to find if you're not in some tech startup or grinding with 2 jobs at once. So when I landed a security guard position at an old factory on the edge of the city, I didn't ask too many questions. I needed a paycheck. It wasn't glamorous. The building was a steel and brick dinosaur that had survived since the 1950s. The outside walls were blackened from decades of exhaust, and the chain-link fence around the lot sagged in a dozen places. Most people would drive past without giving it a second glance. The job was supposed to be simple. Night shifts from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., make rounds every hour, watch the monitors, call in anything suspicious. That's what the listing said anyway. But that wasn't what I got. Before I tell you what happened during those nights and why I'll never take a security job again, you should know. You're listening to Mr. Nightmare. If you like long-form horror stories, creepy experiences, and the kind of tales that make you double-check your locks before bed, make sure you subscribe. Now let me tell you about the strangest set of rules I've ever been handed. My first night, the place was colder than I expected. The heating system groaned like an animal in pain, and the fluorescent lights flickered in sections of the hallways. I could smell dust and oil even though the machinery was supposedly shut down years ago. I was supposed to meet the supervisor, a man named Reynolds. I found him waiting in the security office, leaning back in a squeaky chair, drinking cheap coffee from a paper cup. He was maybe in his 50s, wiry build, thin mustache, with the kind of face that looked permanently unimpressed. He didn't bother standing when I introduced myself. "So you're the new guy," he said flatly. "Guess that makes you the lucky one." "Lucky?" I asked, trying to laugh. "I thought nobody wanted night shift." He gave me a look that wasn't quite a smile, more like he knew something I didn't. "There's a reason for that," he muttered. "You'll figure it out. Or you won't." I thought he was joking. But then he slid a folded piece of paper across the desk toward me. "What's this?" I asked. "Rules," he said simply. 8 of them. You follow these, you'll be fine. Don't follow them, well, let's just say I won't be training another rookie next week. I raised an eyebrow. "Come on, rules?" "Like what? No smoking in the break room?" "Read them," he said, more serious this time. His voice had the weight of someone who'd said the same thing too many times already. I unfolded the paper. The first rule was written in bold letters at the top. Rule 1. Never look directly into the security cameras after midnight. I stared at it, waiting for a punchline, but there wasn't one. Below it, more lines were typed out, each one stranger than the last. My eyes flicked down the list and I felt my stomach tighten without knowing why. "This is some kind of hazing thing, right?" I asked. Reynolds shook his head. "You'll believe it after your first week. Just remember, follow them exactly." He leaned back, drained the rest of his coffee, and tossed the cup in the trash. "Clock in. You're on your own tonight. Don't make me regret hiring you." The rest of that night felt wrong even before anything happened. I kept the piece of paper folded in my pocket, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Why 8 rules? Why those rules? Why did the guy talk like I was walking into a minefield instead of a quiet factory? The monitors hummed in front of me. 8 black and white screens, each covering a hallway, stairwell, or section of the warehouse floor. I sat back watching the clock, telling myself I'd laugh about this later. But deep down, I couldn't shake the way Reynolds had looked at me, like he already knew what was coming. Like the rules weren't a joke at all, and that was just the first hour of my shift. I sat in that security office staring at the folded sheet of paper like it was some kind of puzzle. The fluorescent lights above buzzed and the hum of the monitors filled the silence. 8 rules. Just 8 short sentences typed neatly in bold black ink. I read them once, then again, and by the 3rd time I realized my chest was tight. They weren't funny. They weren't clever. They were the kind of rules that made you ask questions you weren't sure you wanted answered. Rule 1. Never look directly into the security cameras after midnight. Rule 2. If you hear footsteps in the hallway but the monitor shows it empty, stay still and keep the lights off until the sound stops. Rule 3. Never go near the 3rd floor storage after 12:30 a.m. If you must pass by, don't look at the doors. Rule 4. If the factory lights flicker more than 3 times, crouch down, cover your ears, and count slowly to 30 before moving. Rule 5. Don't answer the phone after 2:15 a.m. no matter what you hear. Rule 6. If you see someone in a worker's uniform who doesn't speak, avoid them and don't let them touch you. Rule 7. Never, under any circumstance, look outside the back loading dock between 3 and 3:15 a.m. Rule 8. At 5:47 a.m. exactly, check the eastern window. If you see the sun rising, you're safe. If not, don't leave until it does. My hands felt clammy holding the paper. I muttered the rules under my breath, almost expecting Reynolds to burst out laughing. But he didn't come back. He'd left me alone with the cameras, the static hum of the old building, and those instructions burning in my brain. At first, nothing happened. I sat there watching the screens, listening to the faint rattle of pipes, the occasional creak in the walls. Old buildings make noises, I reminded myself. Detroit is full of them. You can convince yourself anything is haunted if you sit in the dark long enough. Midnight came slow. I kept glancing at the first rule, rolling my eyes at how ridiculous it sounded. Don't look into the cameras? I leaned back in the chair, staring at the monitors as the clock on the wall ticked past 12:01. The building looked empty. No movement in the halls. No workers sneaking around, just shadows and stillness. I was about to push the rule out of my mind when something strange happened. On screen 4, covering the east hallway, the picture fuzzed for a second. Static, then clear again. I leaned closer, squinting at the grainy feed. For just a moment, I thought I saw a shadow, longer than a man should be, crawl across the floor. I blinked and it was gone. My throat went dry. The urge to lean closer to study every inch of the screen was overwhelming. But the words of Rule 1 slammed into my mind. Never look directly into the security cameras after midnight. My heart pounded. I forced myself back in the chair, turning my head away, staring instead at the dirty tiled floor of the office. I counted to 10 under my breath. When I looked again, the screen was normal. Empty hallway. No shadow. Nothing. I told myself it was my imagination, that I was tired, that Reynolds had gotten into my head. But I didn't look directly at the cameras again. Not that night. Around 12:30, I decided to stretch my legs, make a round through the first floor. The rules buzzed in my mind like a song stuck on repeat. The third one came to me as I passed the stairwell. Never go near the third floor storage after 12:30 a.m. I stopped at the bottom step, flashlight in hand, staring up into the blackness. What could be up there? The factory had been mostly gutted years ago. Storage areas were empty shells. Still, I found myself gripping the railing, one foot on the step, debating whether to test the rule. Curiosity can be dangerous. I don't know why, but a chill ran down my back like the air itself was warning me. My flashlight flicked once. The stairwell groaned. I stepped back down and walked away. Back in the office, the clock ticked to 2:10 a.m. I was sipping from my thermos when the phone rang. I froze. The sound was shrill, echoing through the small room. My eyes darted to the rules. Rule 5. Don't answer the phone after 2:15 a.m. The second hand ticked, slow and deliberate. 2:11-2:12. The ringing didn't stop. My throat tightened. I told myself it was a test, maybe Reynolds calling to see if I'd break. 2:13. The phone screamed into the silence, each ring sharper, more urgent. My hand hovered over the receiver. Sweat slicked my palm. 2:14. I swear I heard something on the other end. Faint under the ring. A whisper calling my name. My knees went weak. I yanked my hand back and clutched the rules instead, staring at the clock. 2:15, the phone stopped mid-ring. The silence that followed was heavier than any sound. I sat frozen for a long time. The paper crumpled in my grip, the hair on my arm standing straight up. When the clock hit 3, I didn't need to remind myself about Rule 7. Don't look outside the back loading dock between 3 and 3:15 a.m. The cameras showed nothing unusual, but I felt the weight of that part of the building pressing against me, like whatever was outside could sense me breathing. I turned the monitor off. By the time 5:47 came, my nerves were shot. I stumbled to the eastern window, my stomach knotted. The sky was gray, but the sun was there, bleeding orange over the city skyline. Relief flooded through me so strong my knees buckled. I laughed, a shaky, broken sound. Safe, at least for tonight. But deep down, I knew I hadn't imagined the whisper. By the third night, I told myself I wouldn't make the same mistakes. Stick to the rules, keep my head down, punch out alive. But the truth was, the rules had already burrowed under my skin. I couldn't stop thinking about them. Why the third floor after 12:30? Why the phone at 2:15? Why the window at 5:47? Each line on that paper wasn't just a command, it was a locked door. And locked doors make people like me wonder what's behind them. Reynolds didn't say much when I clocked in. He just looked at me, almost studying me, like he was measuring how long before I broke. "Don't get cocky," he muttered. 3 nights in is when the factory starts. Noticing. He didn't explain what that meant, and I didn't ask. The factory hummed differently tonight. The air felt thicker, the shadows heavier. Even the monitors seemed brighter, like the static was alive. I tried to focus on paperwork, but every few minutes my eyes drifted to the cameras, daring me to look too long. Around midnight, I heard something new. Not footsteps, not dragging. This was humming, a low, tuneless hum drifting from the east wing. My first instinct was to check the monitor, but Rule 1 screamed in my head, "Don't look directly," so I forced myself to listen instead. The hum grew louder, closer, like someone walking the halls. My hand tightened around the flashlight. When the sound reached just outside the office door, I stopped breathing. I waited, expecting a knock, a shadow under the crack. Nothing. Just silence, thick and endless. I counted to 20 before daring to exhale. At 12:40, my route took me near the stairwell again. The 3rd floor loomed above, a void of darkness. The dragging sound didn't come this time. Instead, I heard whispers. Faint, overlapping voices, like a crowd pressed against the ceiling. My throat tightened. Curiosity urged me to climb. Just a few steps, I thought. Just to see. I placed my foot on the bottom stair again. The air dropped colder, my breath visible. The whispers grew clearer, forming words I almost recognized. "Come up! Come up!" They weren't threatening. They sounded pleading, begging. I gripped the railing, knuckles white, and felt the pull. Then a metallic crash echoed from deeper in the hall, snapping me out of it. I yanked my hand away from the rail and stumbled back. My flashlight flickered violently, then steadied. The whispers were gone. Only silence remained. By the time I returned to the office, it was nearly 2:15. My stomach dropped as the phone started ringing. 10 seconds, 15, I knew what was coming, but I wasn't ready. "Pick it up," the voice whispered again. But this time it wasn't behind me. It came from the receiver itself, loud and distorted, overlapping with the ring. "Pick it up, we need you." The phone rattled against the desk like something was shaking it from the inside. My hands twitched toward it, every instinct screaming not to break Rule 5. But what if there were answers on the other end? What if Reynolds was wrong? I pressed my palms against my knees, forcing myself not to move. The phone rattled harder, the voice louder, almost frantic. "You'll regret this. You'll regret ignoring us." Then just as suddenly, silence. The phone stilled. My ears rang in the absence of sound. At 3, I didn't even try to glance at the dock cameras. I angled them away, shoved my chair back, and paced the room instead. But pacing brought me closer to the office window. The blinds were shut, but I could feel something on the other side. A weight pressing against the glass. I leaned forward, my hand inches from the cord to peek out, when the faintest tap tapped against the pane. Not wind. Not random. 3 slow, deliberate knocks. I froze. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, pale and wide-eyed. Behind my reflection, just for a second, another face appeared. Hollow eyes, wide grin, watching. I stumbled back, tripping over the chair, heart slamming against my ribs. The blinds shifted slightly, like something brushed against them from outside. I didn't move until the feeling passed. By the time dawn neared, I was a shell. Rule 8 loomed in my mind. You are safe after the sun rises, but not a second before. I clung to that rule like a lifeline. At 5:47, I dragged myself to the eastern window, repeating the words like a prayer. The sky lightened, streaks of gold breaking the horizon. Relief swelled, but so did dread. Each night was harder, stranger, hungrier. I realized then, the rules weren't just protecting me, they were testing me. Each one was bait, waiting to see if I'd slip, and sooner or later I knew I would. By the 4th night, exhaustion clung to me like a second skin. I hadn't slept more than a few hours in days. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard the ringing phone, the dragging above the 3rd floor, or those 3 deliberate knocks on the window. But money's money, and Detroit doesn't forgive the broke. I needed this job. Still, walking through those factory doors felt like stepping into a predator's den. The air was heavier, like the building itself was waiting for me. Even Reynolds seemed off. He shoved the keys into my palm without a word, but his eyes lingered, searching me like he knew something was coming. By midnight, the tension was unbearable. I sat in the office staring at the wall instead of the monitors, but it didn't matter. I could feel the cameras behind me, like something on the screens was leaning forward, waiting for me to slip. At 12:05, the first crack came. From screen 4, North Corridor, I saw motion in my periphery. I forced my eyes to the desk, nails digging into my palms. The movement grew stronger, clearer. A shape pacing back and forth just at the edge of sight. My throat tightened. Then came the whisper. Look. It wasn't in the room. It was in my head. Clear, direct, like someone speaking inside my skull. My heart pounded. I needed to glance. Just once. I bit my tongue hard enough to taste blood, anchoring myself. The urge passed, but barely. Shaken, I grabbed my flashlight and forced myself onto patrol. Better to keep moving than rot in that chair. The corridors were darker tonight. Not just dim, but oppressive, like the shadows had thickened. My light cut through, but only barely. Pipes groaned overhead, leaking steam that hissed like whispers. When I reached the stairwell, my stomach dropped. Rule 3 again. Never approach the third-floor storage after 12:30, but it was 12:28. Technically, I was safe. My curiosity boiled over. Maybe if I just peeked just once, I'd know what was up there. I started climbing. 1 step, 2, 3. The air grew colder, sharp against my lungs. At the landing, I froze. There was a door at the top of the third-floor stairs. Rusted, dented, but standing firm. And behind it, scratching. Slow, deliberate, like claws against metal. My flashlight trembled. The scratching stopped. Then came 3 loud bangs that shook the frame. I bolted down the stairs, nearly tripping, breath ragged. When I glanced at my watch, it read 12:31. If I'd been up there just a minute longer, I didn't want to imagine. Back in the office, I collapsed into the chair, sweat slick on my neck. The monitors flickered again. Static rolled across every feed, buzzing louder, sharper. I turned away, but my reflection on the dark glass of the window stared back, pale and terrified. At 2:15, the phone rang. I cursed under my breath, knowing what was coming. 10 seconds, 20, then the voice again. This time it was a child's voice, high-pitched, trembling. Please pick up. I'm scared. I can't find my mom. My chest tightened. I knew it was a trick, I knew. But it sounded so real. My hand hovered over the receiver. Just one answer. Just 1 second. The phone rattled violently, the child's voice rising in desperation. Why won't you help me? She's coming. She's coming. The urge broke me. I grabbed the receiver, pressing it to my ear. Instantly, the voice shifted. No longer a child. Deep, guttural, and human. Got you. Every light in the office flickered out. My flashlight died. Darkness swallowed me whole. I dropped the receiver, stumbling back, heart slamming. The phone kept ringing, impossibly loud, even though it dangled from the cord. In the dark, something moved. A scrape across the floor. A breath against my neck, I bolted for the hall, slamming into the wall, fumbling for the spare flashlight on my belt. It flicked on, beam shaking. The office behind me was empty. But the phone still rang, even though I could see it lying silent on the desk. I staggered down the hall, adrenaline flooding me. Every instinct screamed that I'd broken something vital. Rule 5, I'd answered, and now whatever was behind the rules knew me. At 3Q, I realized the loading dock camera was still facing the monitors. I hadn't turned it. My stomach lurched. I sprinted back, grabbed the monitor, and angled it away. Too late. On the black screen, before I turned it, I caught a glimpse. A figure on the dock, tall, thin, taller than the doors themselves. Its head bent low, eyes glowing faintly. And it was facing the camera. Facing me, I shut the monitor off entirely, hands trembling. The rest of the night blurred. Footsteps followed me through every corridor. Whispers crawled across the ceilings. Once, by the eastern window, I swore I saw fingers curl against the glass. Long, bone-thin, scraping lines into the dust. By 5:40, I was broken. My hand shook so violently I could barely hold the flashlight. I pressed myself against the eastern window, chanting the last rule over and over. Safe after sunrise. Safe after sunrise. At 5:47, the light broke. Warmth spilled across the floor, golden and gentle. Relief crashed through me, but it was hollow. Because I knew I'd slipped. I'd answered the phone. I'd looked at the dock. The rules had kept me alive before. Now I wasn't sure they would forgive me. And as I walked out into the daylight, body aching, one thought gnawed at me. The factory knew my name now. The next night, I told myself I was ready. I'd survived the first shift, followed the rules to the letter, and walked out alive. But all day, those 8 sentences kept playing through my head. At the diner where I grabbed coffee, I kept muttering them under my breath like some insane mantra. Rule 1, Rule 2, Rule 3. I didn't even need the paper anymore. The words had branded themselves into my brain. By the time I walked back into the factory lobby, the setting sun bleeding orange against the dusty windows, I felt a mix of dread and excitement. Some part of me wanted answers. Another part, probably the smarter part, just wanted a paycheck. Reynolds was waiting by the time clock. Same sour expression, same chewing jaw. He didn't greet me, didn't smile, just shoved the keys into my hand and grunted. You know the drill. Don't get curious. Curiosity'll kill you faster than anything else in here. I wanted to ask questions, but his stare was the kind that dared you to shut up. So I did. The building felt different the second night. Maybe it was me, more alert, more sensitive. Every creak in the pipes, every groan of settling metal echoed like a warning. I sat in the security office, monitors flickering in front of me, the smell of old dust and fried wiring thick in the air. Midnight came, and with it the memory of the shadow I'd seen crawling across the hall on the cameras. I didn't make the same mistake. I angled the monitors away, letting them sit in my periphery, never looking directly into them. Still, at 12:17, something tested me. On screen 6, showing the west stairwell, I caught movement. Not the kind of glitchy blur I'd expect from old equipment, but deliberate, like a hand gripping the railing, pale fingers curling tight. My eyes almost darted straight to the feed, but I stopped myself in time, staring instead at the corner of the desk. My heart thudded so loud it drowned out the buzzing light. Whatever was there moved slowly, like it knew I was watching. Then it vanished. I exhaled, realizing I'd been holding my breath. Rule 1 had saved me again, but I couldn't shake the question. What happens if you do look directly? What's the real risk? At 12:30, I forced myself onto patrol, flashlight in hand. The first-floor corridors were long stretches of shadow, lined with abandoned machinery and rusting lockers. My footsteps echoed louder than they should have. When I passed the stairwell to the 3rd floor, Rule 3 pounded in my skull. Never go near the 3rd-floor storage after 12:30 a.m. I told myself I'd avoid it, just like last night. But curiosity is a dangerous thing, and I'd had all day for it to ferment. The air around the stairwell felt colder, heavy. I lifted my flashlight, shining it into the darkness above. The beam caught dust floating lazily, like the air itself hadn't been disturbed in years. I stepped closer, heart hammering, and placed one foot on the bottom stair. The metal groaned under my weight. That's when I heard it. A dragging sound. Slow. Deliberate, like something heavy being pulled across the floor above me. I froze, every instinct screaming at me to back away. My light flicked once, dimmed, then steadied. Hello? My voice sounded too loud, bouncing off the stairwell walls. The dragging stopped. Silence. I didn't wait for more. I stepped back, flashlight trembling in my grip, and turned down the hall. My skin crawled like unseen eyes were burning holes into my back. I didn't look up again. Back in the office, I checked the time. 2:09. My chest tightened. Rule 5 loomed. I stared at the black phone on the desk, waiting. At 2:15 exactly, it rang. The sound cut through the air like a knife. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay still. Ring after ring. 10 seconds, 20, 30. This time I didn't even consider answering. Then the voice came. It wasn't under the ring like last night. This time it was clear, sharp, and inside the room. Why didn't you pick up? I froze, my blood turned to ice. The phone was still ringing, but the words came from behind me, close enough that I felt the breath against my ear. I spun around, flashlight beam cutting through the room. Empty. The phone stopped mid-ring. The silence that followed was deafening. I slumped back into the chair, hand trembling against my thermos. My throat was so dry I could barely swallow. Maybe Reynolds was right. Curiosity would kill me. If I'd answered that phone, would I even be sitting here right now? At 3, I turned the monitor for the backloading dock away completely. I didn't need to test Rule 7. Whatever was out there could stay out there, but curiosity gnawed at me. At 3:10, against all better judgment, I inched closer to the window by the office. From here, I couldn't see the dock directly, just a slice of the lot bathed in pale streetlight. And in that slice, I swear I saw movement. Something tall, thin, too tall to be a man. It didn't walk. It glided like the shadows themselves carried it. My stomach dropped. I snapped the blinds shut and forced myself to back away. By the time 5:47 came, I was a wreck. My body shook. My eyes burned from not blinking enough, and every sound felt like a threat. I dragged myself to the eastern window, clutching the rules like scripture. The sun rose again, golden light spilling across the cracked pavement outside, painting the factory in soft warmth. Relief washed through me, but it wasn't the same as last night. This time the relief came with a realization. The rules weren't suggestions. They weren't paranoia from an old man. They were survival guides. And I was only just beginning to understand how thin the line was between living through a night here and never leaving at all. I didn't sleep that morning. My apartment felt infected, like the factory had followed me home. Every creak in the walls, every flicker of the ceiling light made my stomach twist. By noon, I'd convinced myself to call off. Just quit. Pack up, get out of Detroit, leave the whole nightmare behind. But when I dialed Reynolds' number, the line didn't even ring. All I heard was static, then a whisper. "See you tonight." The phone slipped from my hand. I should have left right then. Should have thrown everything in my car and driven until the gas ran dry. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because beneath the fear there was something worse, curiosity, a pull. The same way you can't help but stare at a crash on the freeway. So I went back. Reynolds wasn't at the gate this time. The security shack was empty, the chair rocking slightly like someone had just left. The logbook was open to a fresh page, my name already written there in neat handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside, the factory was alive. The hum of machinery pulsed through the walls, even though I knew the floor hadn't been active in years. The air stank of oil and burnt rubber. As soon as I stepped into the office, the monitors snapped on by themselves. Every screen showed a different angle of the building. For once, they weren't static or distorted. They were clear. Too clear. I saw the third-floor stairwell door vibrating under unseen hands. I saw shadows flitting through the hallways longer than any human should cast. I saw the dock where 6 figures stood perfectly still, facing the cameras like mannequins. And then, on the center screen, I saw something else. Me. Not sitting in the office, but walking the halls. My double moved with slow, deliberate steps, flashlight swinging at his side. His face was blank, his eyes fixed on nothing. But then he turned, looked directly into the camera, and smiled. My stomach lurched. This wasn't just the factory twisting my reflection like before. This was different. It was me, or something that wanted to be. The phone rang. I didn't touch it. I backed away, whispering the rules under my breath. Don't answer after 2 a.m. Don't look at the dock after 3. Don't. The ringing stopped. Then the receiver lifted by itself. The line hissed and my own voice spoke through it. Why are you still here? My knees almost buckled. I pressed against the wall, eyes fixed on the dangling phone. The voice laughed, low and hollow. You can't leave now. You're part of the cycle. The line went dead. That was when I heard the footsteps, heavy boots in the hallway outside. I grabbed my flashlight, heart slamming in my chest. The steps were steady, deliberate, moving closer. Shadows passed under the office door. I braced myself, waiting for it to open. But it didn't. Instead, something slid under the gap. A folded piece of paper, edges dark with grease. I hesitated, then crouched to pick it up. Scrawled in jagged handwriting were 4 words. Rule 9, don't trust Reynolds. The blood drained from my face. There were only 8 rules. I'd memorized them, lived them. What the hell was Rule 9? I spun, scanning the monitors again. On one screen, the double of me stopped walking, turning its head slowly as though it knew I was watching. On another, the 6 figures on the dock began to move, jerky, puppet-like, but faster than before. The factory wasn't just testing me anymore. It was teaching me, adding new rules. At 1:45, I forced myself to patrol. Sitting in the office felt worse than walking the halls, like a trap closing in. The building had changed again. Corridors stretched impossibly long. Doorways led to rooms I'd never seen. Rows of rusted machinery, conveyor belts still stained with something dark. In one corner, I found a locker room. The metal doors warped and bent like they'd been clawed at from the inside. Everywhere I went, I felt watched. Not just by the cameras, but by the walls themselves. Like the factory was a living thing, breathing me in, waiting for me to slip. On the second floor, I heard humming. A child's tune, soft and off-key. My flashlight trembled as I followed it, each note pulling me deeper. At the end of the hall stood a little girl. She couldn't have been older than 7, wearing a dirty white dress. Her hair hung in her face. She was humming and holding. "A key, are you lost?" I asked, though my throat was dry. She didn't answer. She just held up the key and tilted her head. Then without a sound, she slipped through the wall like it was water. I staggered back. The air where she'd been felt colder. On the floor lay a scrap of fabric from her dress, damp and smelling faintly of smoke. I pocketed it without thinking. The humming didn't stop. It echoed from further down the hall, pulling me on. By 2:10, my nerves were shredded. I ducked into a storage room, slamming the door shut. Shelves towered around me, filled with old boxes and tools. For a moment, I thought I was safe. Then I noticed the writing. Every wall was covered in carvings, thousands of words etched deep into the metal. At first, I thought they were random scratches. But no, they were names. Row after row of them, in different hands, different eras. Some rusted over, others fresh. And near the center of the wall, carved so deep the metal bent inward, was my own name. When I woke the next afternoon, I swore I'd quit. No paycheck was worth what happened the night before. My hands still shook as I brewed cheap coffee in my apartment, my ears ringing with the guttural "got you" from the receiver. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that figure on the dock, too tall, too thin, watching. But then the bills on the kitchen counter reminded me. Rent was late. My car payment was overdue, and part of me, God help me, part of me wanted to know what would happen next. It was like the rules weren't just binding me, they were pulling me back. So that night, against reason, I returned. Reynolds didn't look surprised. If anything, he looked disappointed. "You answered it, didn't you?" His voice was low, like he already knew. I didn't reply. His stare lingered, then he muttered, "Then you better pray you're quicker than whatever picked up on the other end." He shoved the keys into my hand and walked away. The office felt different now. Not like a place of work, but a cage. The monitors hummed louder, static buzzing in patterns I swore formed shapes. I tried turning them off, but every time I looked back, one would flicker alive again, glowing faintly in the dark. At midnight, I started my patrol. The corridors seemed longer than before, stretching further than they should. My flashlight beam struggled, swallowed by the dark. As I passed the stairwell, the scratching from the 3rd floor was waiting. But this time it wasn't distant. It was fast, aggressive. Something slammed against the door above again and again, shaking the whole frame. Dust rained down. "Let us out." A dozen voices screamed at once. I bolted, heart hammering, but no matter which hall I took, the stairwell door seemed to reappear ahead of me. Like the factory was rearranging itself, forcing me back. I sprinted, sweat dripping into my eyes until I stumbled into the office again. My watch read 12:45. Somehow I'd been running in circles for 15 minutes. At 1:30, the monitors all flickered on by themselves. Every feed glowed with the same image, the back dock. Empty at first. Then slowly, something stepped into view. It wasn't one figure this time. It was a group, 5. No, 6 figures, tall, stiff, all identical. They moved in perfect unison, gliding across the concrete. They stopped in front of the camera, turning their heads at the same time. And even though I wasn't looking directly, I felt their eyes lock on me. The screens buzzed louder, static screaming. My vision blurred. My nose started to bleed. I yanked the power cord from the wall, plunging the room into darkness. The buzzing stopped, but the silence that followed was worse. At 2:15, the phone didn't ring. Instead, the office lights flickered violently. The receiver lifted by itself, dangling in the air, swinging slowly. Then from the speaker, a voice hissed, "You answered once. Now you belong to us." The line crackled with static so loud it rattled the glass. I backed into the corner, whispering the rules like a prayer. Finally, the receiver dropped with a thud. The lights steadied, but the smell of burnt wires lingered, acrid and choking. By 3 AUG, I was a wreck. I couldn't sit still, couldn't think. My only focus was survival, but Rule 7 loomed. Do not look at the loading dock camera after 3 MAUG. I'd already broken it once. What more could it take? Then came the knocking. Not at the window this time. At the door. 3 heavy thuds rattled the frame. I froze, every hair on my body standing on end. Slowly, the handle began to turn. I lunged forward, slamming the deadbolt down. The metal rattled violently, the door shaking in its frame. From the other side, a voice whispered, "We saw you. We saw you on the dock." My heart dropped. My breath came in shallow gasps. The knocking stopped. I didn't move for 10 minutes. At 3:20, curiosity gnawed at me. I peeked through the blinds of the office window. The lot outside wasn't empty anymore. The 6 figures from the monitor stood there motionless, staring at the building. Their heads twitched in unison, all snapping toward me. I dropped the blinds, instantly stumbling back. The rest of the night blurred into torment. Doors slammed in distant halls. Machinery roared to life, though no one was there. At one point, I turned a corner and saw my own reflection walking toward me. Same uniform, same face, except its smile was too wide, its eyes too dark. I staggered back and it vanished into smoke. By 5:40, I was broken. Every muscle ached, every nerve frayed. The factory had been toying with me, bending the rules to see how far I'd go. At 5:47, I clung to the eastern window like a lifeline. The sky lightened, gold pushing back the black. Relief hit me in waves. The voices faded. The whispers died. But just before the sun broke fully, I caught a glimpse in the reflection of the glass. Not me, not a shadow, it was one of the figures, standing directly behind me. When the first beam of sunlight spilled across the floor, it was gone. But the chill remained. Walking out that morning, the rules felt less like survival and more like chains. I'd broken them, and now the factory wasn't just testing me, it was claiming me. I stumbled backward from the wall, my name burning into my vision. It hadn't been there when I started this job. That meant someone or something had added it since. My flashlight flickered, dimming until the beam was barely aglow. The storage room air grew heavy, pressing against my lungs. From the corner, metal scraped, slow, deliberate. I swung the light just in time to see one of the names carving itself deeper, as if invisible hands were at work. Sparks hissed as the letters formed. Tonight. I bolted. The hallway outside was darker than before, lights dead, shadows stretching like tar. My footsteps echoed wrong, like there was a second set half a beat behind me. I tried to focus on the rules, repeating them in my head. But Rule 9 gnawed at me. Don't trust Reynolds. What did that mean? Had he known more than he let on? Had he been feeding me into this trap? Turning a corner, I froze. Reynolds stood there. Not in his uniform, but in filthy work overalls, oil smeared across his chest. His eyes glowed faintly in the dark, and his smile was too wide, too stiff. Good to see you're adapting, he said. His voice was calm, casual, but wrong, like two people speaking at once. What the hell is going on? I demanded, though my voice cracked. Why is my name on those walls? Why are there more rules? Reynolds tilted his head. The factory makes its own rules. Always has. Always will. We just enforce them, until we're replaced. My stomach dropped. Replaced. I took a step back. You're not real, he chuckled. Real enough to keep you here. And then his face rippled, melting like hot wax, reshaping into mine. Within seconds, I was staring at my own duplicate again, flashlight dangling in his hand. The doppelgänger lunged. I barely dodged, stumbling into the stairwell. The door slammed behind me, locking on its own. I tore down the steps, the echo of boots crashing above me. My lungs burned, my chest tight. On the ground floor, I burst into the main hallway, only to find it lined with mannequins. Dozens of them, shoulder to shoulder, facing me. Their glassy eyes glimmered in the emergency light. I froze. If I moved, would they? Then in unison, their heads tilted. Not left, not right. Straight up toward the ceiling. A thunderous crash erupted above me. The stairwell door splintered. My double was coming, I had no choice. I sprinted through the mannequins. Cold plastic fingers brushed my arms, but none of them grabbed me. Not yet, the dock, my only chance. When I burst outside, icy air hit me like a wall. The 6 figures were still there, but closer now, standing just yards from the doorway. Their faces were shrouded in shadow, but I knew they were watching me, waiting. Behind me, the double's footsteps closed in. Ahead, the 6 figures began to fan out, blocking the way. I was trapped. Then I remembered the scrap of fabric from the little girl's dress in my pocket. I yanked it out, held it high. The figures froze. For a split second, the factory itself seemed to hesitate, like the rules didn't cover this. A whisper filled the air, threading into my skull. The key. Find the key, the girl. The key she held. My flashlight beam cut across the dock. There, a rusted locker, half buried in debris. Something glimmered inside. I dashed toward it, the double's footsteps pounding just behind me. My fingers scraped the rust as I pried the locker open. Inside was a small brass key, warm to the touch, pulsing faintly like a heartbeat. The moment I grabbed it, the world tilted. The dock dissolved into smoke. The mannequins collapsed into heaps of plastic. The figures shattered like glass, and I was back in the office. Every monitor showed the same image. Me, standing in the center of the room, clutching the key. On one screen, though something was different, the double. He wasn't gone. He was sitting in the chair watching me, and this time he whispered, "Rule 10. The screen went black. The brass key pulsed in my hand, warm and alive, like it had its own heartbeat. Every monitor was black now except one, the one showing my double in the chair. He leaned forward slowly, resting his chin on his palms. His smile was lazy, confident, like he knew I was cornered. Then the PA system crackled to life. I'd never heard it work before. A voice, my voice, echoed through every hallway of the factory. "Attention, employee. Final evaluation begins now." The walls shook. The lights strobed. The key grew hotter, branding my skin, but I couldn't let go. A door I'd never seen before slid open at the back of the office. Beyond it stretched a narrow corridor lined with red lights, pulsing in rhythm with the key. I didn't want to go in, but the office behind me had begun to warp, the walls bending inward like a throat swallowing me whole. I ran. The corridor stretched forever, metal groaning under each step. My voice followed me over the PA, repeating phrases in a mechanical cadence. "Don't trust your eyes. Don't trust the rules. Don't trust yourself." I turned a corner and stopped dead. The hallway split into 3 paths. At the mouth of each stood a figure. Left. The little girl, still clutching the key she had shown me before, her eyes wide, pleading. Middle, Reynolds, in his uniform again, calm and steady, hand outstretched like he was offering to guide me. Right, my double, face blank, but this time holding a clipboard, tapping it with a pen like a manager waiting for my choice. The PA hissed, "Choose." 1 leads forward. 2 lead to ruin, my pulse hammered. The real rules had never mentioned this. I stared at each figure, searching for a tell. The girl hummed softly that same off-key tune. Reynolds gave a slight nod as if assuring me he was safe. My double smiled faintly, scribbling something down on his clipboard. I gripped the brass key tighter. Its pulse quickened when I looked at the girl. I stepped left, she didn't move. She just turned, pressed her small hand against the wall, and a door opened where there hadn't been one. I slipped through, and the door slammed shut behind me. The room beyond looked like a break room. Tables, vending machines, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. For a moment it almost felt normal. But then I saw the bulletin board. Pinned across it were dozens of memos, all dated decades apart, all with the same header. Rule updates. The first sheet listed the original 8. But each page after added more. Rule 9, don't trust Reynolds. Rule 10, don't look at your double too long. Rule 11, if you hear your own voice from the vents, don't answer. Rule 12, when the key begins to burn, run. The list went on, 15, 20, 30, the rules didn't end. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat. The factory wasn't giving me guidelines. It was binding me 1 rule at a time until escape was impossible. Something banged against the vending machine. I spun, flashlight beam cutting through the buzzing lights. Inside the glass, pressed against the candy bars, was a face. My face. Eyes bulging, mouth stretched in a silent scream. The glass cracked. I bolted out the back door of the break room and into another hallway. This one was different. Slick with moisture, pipes dripping overhead, steam hissing from vents. The air stank of rust and blood. Ahead, something skittered across the floor. Dozens of somethings. Rats. Their eyes glowed red in the dark, their bodies twisted, too long, too sharp. They swarmed toward me in a tide. I sprinted, boots splashing through filthy puddles, rats snapping at my heels. One leapt onto my leg, biting through the fabric. I smashed it against the wall, but 3 more took its place. The key burned hotter. I didn't think. I shoved it into the nearest vent. The brass seared the metal, and with a hiss, a hidden door slid open. I dove through, slamming it shut just as the rat tide crashed against it. This room was worse. It was the factory floor, but not how I remembered. Machines roared, conveyor belts clattered, molten sparks rained from above. But there were no workers, Just mannequins, hundreds of them dressed in uniforms, moving like puppets as they mimicked assembly line tasks. Every single one turned to look at me when I stepped inside. I froze, holding my breath. Then, in eerie unison, they lifted their hands and pointed toward the far end of the floor. A massive furnace loomed there, flames roaring behind a steel grate. The PA system boomed, "Feed the fire." The mannequins began to march toward me. Panic surged through me. I had nothing to give, nothing except the key. I clutched it tighter, shaking my head. No, it was the only thing keeping me alive. But the mannequins pressed closer, their plastic hands grasping, their hollow eyes unblinking. I sprinted for the furnace. The heat scorched my face, sweat pouring down my neck. I raised the key over the flames, then stopped. The mannequins froze. Inches away, for a heartbeat silence. Then from inside the furnace, a voice whispered, "Not the key. You." The mannequins lunged. I dropped to the ground, rolling between them, scrambling toward a side door. The furnace roared, the floor shaking as though it was furious I'd refused its offering. I shoved the door open and stumbled into the night air. Except it wasn't night. I was back at the security shack. The gate was closed. My car was parked outside, keys dangling in the ignition. The city skyline glowed in the distance, calm, normal. Had I made it out? I turned to the shack. Inside, the logbook was open. My name was there, under today's date, but below it, one more entry had been added in unfamiliar handwriting. Rule 13. No one leaves. The brass key went cold in my hand. The night air was cold against my skin, sharper than I remembered. I stood at the gate, staring at my car just a few feet away. The keys dangled from the ignition like an invitation. For the first time in hours, the factory behind me was silent. No humming, no footsteps, no whispers. Just stillness. I laughed, weak, broken. Maybe I had passed the test. Maybe the key had been enough. I slid into the driver's seat, the familiar smell of old leather grounding me. The engine turned over on the first try. Headlights cut through the dark, and I pulled onto the empty street, Detroit's skyline glowing faintly ahead. The further I drove, the lighter I felt. My hands loosened on the wheel, my chest unknotted. By the time I reached my apartment, the factory already felt like a bad dream. Inside, the place was quiet. I dropped my boots by the door, collapsed onto the couch, and let myself breathe. For the first time, no rules whispered in my head. No phantom footsteps, just silence. Sleep hit me like a wave. When I woke, sunlight streamed through the blinds. Morning, real morning. Birds chirped outside, traffic hummed in the distance. I hadn't realized how much I'd missed the ordinary sounds of life. I brewed coffee, savoring the warmth in my hands. My reflection in the kitchen window looked normal again. Pale, tired, but me. For a few days, life felt almost whole. I walked the streets, went to the store, even called my sister just to hear her voice. When she asked how work was going, I almost laughed. But at night, the dreams returned. They started small. The sound of humming, faint in the background of my sleep. A flash of mannequins when I closed my eyes. The image of my name carved into the wall. Then one night I woke to the sound of a key turning in my apartment door. I froze, holding my breath. But nothing followed. In the morning, the lock worked fine. No signs of tampering. Still, I couldn't shake it. A week later, as I left for groceries, I noticed something odd. Across the street, a man stood perfectly still, watching me. He wore a factory uniform. The old kind, the kind I'd seen in photos hanging in the office. When I blinked, he was gone. I told myself it was paranoia, trauma playing tricks. But the next night, I heard a knock on my window. 3 sharp raps in rhythm. When I pulled the curtain, no one was there. Just the faint reflection of myself in the glass, only I wasn't smiling, but the reflection was. The key still sat on my dresser. Cold now, lifeless. But some nights I swore I heard it ticking, like a clock. By the second week, I stopped sleeping. Coffee and exhaustion blurred my days into one long haze. My friends said I looked pale, jittery, like I hadn't rested in months. They didn't understand. How could they? One evening, desperate for peace, I drove across town, away from my apartment, away from the factory. I parked by the river, let the water soothe me. For a while, it worked. The city lights danced on the surface, the current whispered softly. But then I looked at my reflection, and my reflection didn't look back. It stared past me, eyes wide, mouth opening in a silent scream. The surface rippled, and the vision was gone. I stumbled back from the river, heart pounding. The key was warm in my pocket again. When I got home, a piece of paper was waiting on my doorstep. No envelope, just a single sheet folded in half. My name written across the front. Inside, scrawled in jagged handwriting, were 4 words. Rule 14. Get ready. The paper shook in my hands. 4 words. 4 words that didn't belong in my world anymore. Rule 14. Get ready. I wanted to laugh, to burn the damn thing right there on the doorstep. But my hands wouldn't stop trembling. Whoever left it knew where I lived. Whoever wrote it knew the rules hadn't ended with the factory. That night I locked every door, every window. I shoved a chair against the front door and sat on the couch with the lights on. My phone in one hand, the key in the other. Hours dragged by. Silence. But at exactly 3:03 a.m., the key twitched in my palm. I swear it did. A subtle vibration like a heartbeat. Then a sound, metal tapping against metal, from my bedroom. I forced myself to look. The dresser drawer, the one where I had kept the key all week, was open. Just a sliver, but open, and written on the mirror above it in foggy condensation were 2 words. Not done. By morning I knew I couldn't ignore it anymore. Something followed me out. The factory wasn't just a place, it was a parasite, and I was its new host. I needed answers. So I drove back. Detroit's skyline shrank in the rearview mirror as I crossed into the industrial district. The roads grew emptier, cracked, choked with weeds. Then I saw it, the factory. Its smokestacks rising like dead fingers, windows black and blind. The gate hung open, chains dangling uselessly. It was waiting. Inside, the air felt heavier than I remembered. Dust motes floated in slanted beams of light. Machines sat silent, but there was a hum beneath it all. A low vibration, alive, steady as a heartbeat. The rules I'd memorized whispered back into my head. Don't whistle. Never look at the mannequins twice. Keep the door to the 3rd hallway shut. Only now more words bled through. Rules I had never seen before. Rule 11, don't take it home. Rule 12, if you do, it will follow. Rule 13, it wants your name. And now, Rule 14. My footsteps echoed on the concrete as I made my way to the security office. The chair was still overturned from that first night. The logbook sat on the desk, its cover warped with moisture. I opened it. Every page had changed. No longer a neat grid of shift times and signatures. Instead, each page held a single word, written over and over until the ink bled through. Prepare. The word repeated hundreds, maybe thousands of times, in different handwriting, different sizes, as if written by generations of guards before me. At the bottom of the last page was a name. My name. Panic clawed at me, but I turned the page. Blank. For a second, relief washed over me, but then the ink bled through again, forming fresh letters. You're next. The room tilted. My vision swam. I staggered back, nearly tripping over the chair. The hum in the walls grew louder, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. I had to get out. But the hallway beyond the office wasn't empty anymore. Mannequins lined the walls. Shoulder to shoulder, their painted eyes fixed on me. Not the same cracked, broken things from before. These were dressed in uniforms, my uniform. Security patches stitched to their sleeves, steel-toed boots polished clean. Their faces were smooth, blank, but they leaned forward slightly like they were listening. The logbook slipped from my hand. The moment it hit the floor, every mannequin tilted its head in unison. Something whispered behind me. Get ready. I spun, but no one was there. Only the office door creaking slowly shut. I ran, corridors twisted into each other, new halls branching where none had existed. The factory was growing, alive, reshaping itself around me. The hum became a roar, vibrating in my bones. I burst into the main floor where the machines sat cold. Only now they weren't cold, they were moving. Cogs spun, conveyor belts lurched to life, sparks lit the shadows. At the center of it all stood a figure, not a mannequin, not a worker, a man in a security uniform. My uniform. His back was to me, but I recognized the shape, the way he stood, slouched but solid. It was like looking at a mirror. When he turned, my breath caught. It was me. Paler, hollow-eyed, skin stretched tight, but me, he smiled. Rule 14, he said, voice raw and metallic. Get ready to replace me. The machines thundered louder. The air grew hot, choking with smoke. My double raised a hand and the mannequin stepped forward, encircling me, boots thudding in sync. I clutched the key, its edges biting into my palm. The other me tilted his head. It doesn't open doors anymore. It opens you. My chest constricted, my vision dimming. The mannequins closed in. I swung wildly, shoving them aside, but their grip was cold iron. Then, without thinking, I did the one thing I wasn't supposed to. I shouted. "Stop!" The factory froze. Machines halted mid-grind. Sparks hung motionless in the air. Even the mannequins stilled, hands frozen inches from my arms. The double's smile faltered. "You're not supposed to break the rules." I staggered back, clutching the key. Then maybe the rules don't own me. For the first time, silence reigned. The hum ceased. The air lightened, dust falling gently to the ground. The double's eyes flickered. His body cracked, fissures spreading across his skin like broken porcelain. "You can't run forever," he rasped, his voice fractured, splitting into echoes. "We'll come for you. Rule 15 is waiting." Then he shattered, splinters of glass scattering into nothing. The mannequins collapsed. The machines groaned into silence and the factory exhaled. I stumbled outside, lungs burning, clothes soaked with sweat. The sky above was gray, bleeding into dawn. I made it back to my car, but I didn't start the engine. Not yet. The key lay heavy in my hand, cool against my skin. It no longer ticked, no longer pulsed. Just a piece of metal again, or maybe not. When I looked at its reflection in the rearview mirror, it wasn't a key at all. It was an eye blinking, watching, and in the distance, faint against the morning wind, came a whisper. "Get ready." I thought I was free. When the sun rose over Detroit's skyline that morning, painting the cracked streets in pale gold, I told myself I'd close that chapter for good. The factory was behind me. The mannequins were rubble. My hollow-eyed double had shattered like glass. But the key wouldn't let me believe it. It sat in my pocket, heavier than ever. Whenever I touched it, a sharp warmth pulsed back, like it had veins, like it was alive. Sometimes I swore I could hear it clicking, though I hadn't turned it in any lock. And then there were the whispers. Always just out of earshot, 3 words repeated over and over like an echo down an endless hallway. "Get ready." 3 nights later, I woke to the sound of scratching. Not outside, not at the door, but inside the walls. I held my breath, straining to listen. A soft drag of nails against drywall circling my bedroom. Then a whisper closer than ever. Rule 15. The air turned ice cold. I fumbled for the lamp, but the bulb flickered once and died. The room fell into a darkness so thick it felt physical, pressing against my skin. I staggered to the window, ripped open the blinds, only to find no city skyline. No streets, no stars, just the factory. Its hulking shape filled the horizon, smokestacks clawing into a sky the color of rust. The sight knocked the breath out of me. I wasn't in my apartment anymore. The walls had shifted. The key had brought me back, and on my dresser, where the lamp had been, lay a fresh piece of paper. Rule 15. Trade places. The door creaked open on its own. Beyond it stretched the factory's endless corridors, swallowing my bedroom whole. Cold air rushed in, carrying that mechanical hum louder than ever. My legs moved before my brain could stop them. The hallways stretched, twisted. Doors appeared where none should exist, each marked with rules scrawled in dripping ink. Rule 7, never whistle. Rule 9, don't open the locker. Rule 12, it will follow. Each one buzzed against my skull like a hornet's nest. Then, I turned a corner and froze. He was waiting, the double. My double. Only this time he wasn't cracked, wasn't broken. He looked stronger, healthier. Like every ounce of life drained from me had poured into him. His uniform was pressed, his boots spotless. He smiled the same way I used to in old photos before exhaustion carved me hollow. "You lasted longer than most," he said. His voice was mine, only smoother, confident. "But everyone follows the rules in the end." I clenched the key in my fist. "I broke them once. I'll do it again," he laughed. "And yet you're here, brought back by the key you think belongs to you." It doesn't, it never did. It belongs to us. The floor shook beneath my feet. Machines roared to life all around. Conveyor belts churned, gears shrieked, steam hissed from pipes overhead. From the shadows, mannequins crawled forth, no longer stiff but fluid, their blank faces twitching as they shuffled closer. The double stepped forward. Rule 15 is simple. Someone always replaces the guard. Someone always keeps the factory alive. Trade places with me. Finish the cycle. or we'll take more than just your life." I backed away, but the wall stretched to block me. The mannequins circled, arms jerking unnaturally, jaws unhinging in soundless screams. My chest tightened, my vision blurred. I remembered every warning, every line of ink in that cursed logbook. Don't take it home. It will follow. It wants your name, trade places, and then, buried in memory, something else. My old boss's words the night he hired me. Don't worry about the rules too much. They're not meant to protect you. They're meant to protect the factory. The factory, that was the real parasite. The rules were its way of feeding, of keeping its host alive long enough to pass it on. I wasn't going to pass it on. I lifted the key. It burned against my skin, pulsing like a heart ready to burst. My double smile faltered. Don't do it. The mannequins froze mid-step. The machine screeched louder, as if the factory itself sensed what I intended. I shouted over the roar. No more rules. And I jammed the key into the concrete floor. The world screamed. Not the machines, not the mannequins, the world. Walls split, gears tore themselves apart. Lights burst into showers of sparks. The mannequins collapsed, their limbs scattering like broken toys. My double staggered, clutching his chest. Cracks split across his skin, bleeding light. You can't, he rasped. Without the rules, there's nothing. No order, no guard, no factory. Good, I said, pressing the key deeper. The floor shattered. The key sank, melting into the earth, dragging the factory down with it. The walls folded inward, beams collapsing, smokestacks snapping like brittle bones. My double screamed, not in pain, but in rage. If you erase us, you erase yourself. His body fractured into shards, scattering like ash in the storm. The hum died. For the first time since I took the job, silence reigned. When I opened my eyes, I was lying in my apartment. Morning sunlight streamed through the blinds. The city skyline was back where it belonged. The key was gone. I checked every pocket, every drawer. Nothing. For a brief, shining moment, I believed I'd done it. That I had broken the cycle. But then I noticed the dresser. On its surface lay the logbook. Its pages fluttered open on their own, stopping at the very last. My name was there again, written in bold strokes. But underneath, a new line had appeared. Next guard. The ink dripped slowly, as if still being written. That night, I tried to sleep. Every creak in the walls made me sit upright. Every shadow seemed to stretch longer than it should. My phone buzzed once. No caller ID, I didn't answer. At 3:33 a.m., I heard it. A knock at the door, slow, rhythmic, 3 taps, pause, 3 more. I didn't move, didn't breathe, but in my head the whisper returned, clearer than ever. Rule 16 is waiting. For a week I told myself it was over. The logbook sat locked inside a drawer, untouched. The key was gone. The factory was rubble in my memory, a nightmare I'd clawed my way out of. In the daylight, things almost felt normal. I woke, made coffee, sat by the window watching Detroit crawl to life. The streetcars rattled past, neighbors headed to work. Kids kicked a half-flat soccer ball down the cracked pavement. It was ordinary, almost painfully so. But every night when the city quieted, the truth crept back in. The silence wasn't the same anymore. It had a weight to it, like the hum of the factory still vibrated under my skin. I'd lie awake listening for footsteps in the hallway, for the mannequin's stiff boots. I'd jolt upright at every creak, every knock in the pipes, my breath fogging the air like I was still trapped in those damp corridors. Sleep didn't bring relief. Dreams dragged me back into the factory. Endless rules scrawled across walls, my name written over and over until the letters melted into my face. When I woke, I half expected to see the logbook open beside me, its pages fluttering. One evening, I went to take out the trash. My neighbor, an old woman who usually never spoke, stood in the hall staring at me. Not at my face, but at my pocket. Like she could see the outline of the key that wasn't there anymore. Her lips moved silently, repeating something I couldn't hear. When I finally forced myself to say hello, she only smiled. But her teeth were wrong, too many, too sharp, and when I blinked, she was gone. The bag of trash hit the floor with a thud. I told myself I was imagining it. Stress, lack of sleep, trauma. But deep down, I knew better. The factory doesn't die. It doesn't crumble, it moves. It waits. Small things started piling up. The clock in my kitchen ticked slower than it should. 1 second stretched into 2. I'd look away, then back again and find the minute hand jerking forward in chunks like time itself was stuttering. At 3:33 a.m. one night, I woke to knocking. 3 sharp taps, pause, 3 more. My heart stopped cold. I didn't move, didn't breathe. Hours later, when sunlight finally reached my window, the marks were there. 3 small dents in the wood exactly at eye level. The rules were bleeding back in, even here. Even after everything, I tried writing it down. Every sound, every vision, every dream. The logbook wasn't enough. I needed proof outside of its cursed pages. But when I came back the next day, every note I'd written was gone. Not torn out, not erased, just gone. The paper was blank. Only 1 line remained at the bottom of the last page in handwriting I didn't recognize. Rule 16. Don't stop telling the story. That's when it clicked. The rules weren't just about surviving in the factory. They were about spreading it, keeping the cycle alive, carrying the infection from one guard to the next, from one listener to another. And maybe, by telling this, I've already broken that rule. Or maybe I've followed it exactly as they wanted. If you're listening now, if you've stayed through every word, maybe you feel it too. That hum under your skin. The faint tick of a clock running slower than it should. Maybe tonight you'll wake to the sound of knocking, or see condensation spelling words across your mirror. Maybe the rules are looking for you next. I can't stop it. I couldn't escape it. All I can do is warn you, don't take the job. Don't take the key. Don't trade places. And if you see a piece of paper waiting on your doorstep with 4 words you never wanted to read, get ready. Just know it's already too late. You've been listening to another nightmare, told on this channel. If this story kept you up tonight, if it made you check your locks twice or glance over your shoulder, do me a favor. Like the video, subscribe, and share it. The rules might keep spreading whether we want them to or not, but at least you'll never face them alone. Sweet dreams.